Well, I started as a skater when I was 5, 6 years old, and took part of course, many competitions in Sweden, and I became the national champion and the Nordic champion. And then when I stopped skating, I continued as a leader in my club here and started to educate myself as a judge, and then started, of course, on the national level, and then, well, around 1970, I became an international judge, and then finally an ISU championship judge and referee, and then 1988 I was elected to the figure committee, ISU figure committee. Yes, I think so. I think it's easier if you have been a skater before, especially to become a judge, because you understand the difficulties and you see the good and bad parts in the skating. I think it's easier. Well, I was sitting in the stand, and after the Canadian had skated, I was absolutely sure that they would win the gold medal, because for me their skating was absolutely the best, and they had absolutely no mistake, and the presentation was absolutely wonderful. So I was really surprised when the Russian pair won the gold medal. And I came back to the hotel together with Sally Stapleford, and we decided to go and eat some food in the restaurant. And I went upstairs, came down again in the dining room, or in the corridor before the dining room 5 minutes later, and then she was talking to Marie LeGougne. And I went over there, and Marie told me that she was pushed by Didier Gailhaguet to put the marks in favor of the Russian pair, and then the Russian judges were going to judge in favor of the French dance couple. And of course I was really astonished. I couldn't really believe what she was telling me, but she said that the French judges were really pushed by Didier during many years to judge in favor of certain skaters, and we had heard this before, but we had no proof. And anyway, we told her to put this in writing, but she said she didn't want to do that. And then she told me again that I knew when I put in the marks that my result was wrong. And then we told her that we had to put in a report to the president Cinquanta, and she didn't give us any reply to that. And again we asked her, and just to make it sure now, Marie, it was Didier who pushed you to do this? And the answer from her was yes. And so the day after, Sally put in a report, which we all signed. Also Valborga Grimm at that time had joined our group. And Sally Stapleford and Joyce Heisey from the council then went to Octavio Cinquanta the morning after with this report. And then by that time, I think media also started to find out that something was going on, because we were standing in the corridor and many people were passing during our discussion. So I think they understood that something is really not right here. Well, first I think that Mr. Cinquanta didn't want to do anything about it, but I think he was forced by the IOC to meet with the media, and also to the IOC wanted him to give out a second gold medal, which I think in a way was correct, because she had come forward and told everybody that, or told us that she was pushed to give the incorrect result. So it was only fair, and then also he didn't. So for me, he didn't have much choice than to give them award a second medal. And of course, I mean, after all this came up, I think the Russian judge for in ice dancing, she didn't even give the first place to the French dance couple. And during a hearing we had in Lausanne, I was actually asked by the French lawyer, by Didier, who, if there was any evidence that this was a deal. But how can you answer yes or no on such a question when after all this scandal had already was out in the media? So of course the Russian decided not to judge in favor of the French because there were so many others who were doing it. So for them it was a kind of putting the, cover it all up. Well, it's fantastic that they now are back again in the arenas, and Marie can even start to judge again. And to me, it's such a thing that she did would really result in a forever she would be out of judging. But this is the way Mr. Cinquanta wanted it, and he wanted to make sure before he decided how many years she would be suspended, that she could come back after 3 years as a championship judge, and that was in our rule book. So that's why he only gave her 3 years. It means that she doesn't have to retake the exam to become an ISU championship judge. She can just continue on the same level. If it had been more than 3 years, she would have had to start again to be an international judge and take the exam and so on. Well, I mean, the official answer has been that there was no proof. But it was an election year, this year also, and I think Mrs. Cinquanta needed the votes of the Russian members, because it's out there that it's Mr. Pisev who more or less is the deciding man over the other Russian members, whom they will vote for, what kind of proposal they will vote for, and so on. So I think also Cinquanta was not in favor of upsetting them in any way. He wanted to have their votes, and he wanted to make sure that they were voting on the people he wanted to have on the council and on the committee. So I think it was just a tactic from him, a political thing, not to involve the Russians. Oh, that was, I think, the day after they awarded the medal. Then Cinquanta again had a press conference, and I was sitting in my hotel room, and my TV was on, and then I was surprised to hear they were announcing another press conference with Mr. Cinquanta. So he then started to present this new system, and that they should use computers and push buttons and all of this. And I must say, I had never ever heard of this before. And also in the middle of this interview, my telephone was ringing, and it was Ellie Stapleford. And she was at that time the chairperson of the figure committee. And she was also watching the TV. And she said to me, "Britta, have you ever heard about this?" And I said, "No, this is a really surprise for the figure committee. We were never ever involved with this, and never ever was it discussed with us before Mr. Cinquanta presented this." And then also right after this press conference, he called some committee members. It was Mr. LeGougne from the figure committee, it was Mrs. Anne Shaw from the dance committee, and it was Marie Lundmark from the synchronized skating committee. And they, together with, I think it was Peter Crick and Andreas Sigurdsson, Vigedata, and Ted Barton, they were all involved in a special working group. And then they started to work on this new system, and also that we were never involved in this work, and they were told not to discuss it with any other committee member or so. And so this was kept as a total secret until the proposal was send out before the Congress that summer. Well, it was presented as an urgent proposal in the general regulations, and that meant that Mr. Cinquanta could present this proposal to the whole Congress. I mean, also the speed skating side was present, and the members representing speed skating. And first, it was a big discussion whether it should be presented like this and why it had to be a rule and couldn't be presented just in a communication, which is the normal way of trying new systems. But Mr. Cinquanta was the whole time pointing out it was not a rule, it was going to be a project. I think he told us this at least 6 times during his speech. And over and over again, people from the especially figure skating side, they didn't want to have it like this, but finally at the end there was a vote, and of course the speed skating side, they more or less voted in favor of this project rule. And so it was accepted, but still it was only going to be a project. But then when the rule book was printed some months later, of course it was in the rule book and it had suddenly become a rule. Yes, they also voted on it, which to me was totally wrong, as this was really such a big and an important issue for the figure skating side and only for the figure skating members to decide whether we wanted to have a new system, whether we wanted to have this kind of system tested. But that was never discussed. It became a rule very quickly. Yes, I think so. I think it's time that figure skating has their own association, that it could be run by people who really knows figure skating. And also it's well known that it's figure skating who has been earning most of the money the ISU has, and also then therefore it should be spent on figure skating. We need money to develop figure skating in many parts of the world and to educate coaches, judges, and many of our members don't have so much money, so it's really necessary. But now we have to share, of course, a lot of money with the speed skating side. I think that Mr. Cinquanta had promised IOC to have a new system in place before the Olympics coming up now in Turin. And therefore it was such a rush, and he wanted to show them that he could do it. And so that's why they did it. And they only tested it for 1 year, and then they had another Congress. And so at this Congress, it was decided to put this system really into the rule book. And the question from him was that if there was another system that we could put in, that the members could put in place instead. But of course, there was a couple of other proposals, but none of them were really tested the way the ISU had tested their system, and of course because of money and they had no possibility. But there were some other good ideas also up in the Congress, but only this ISU system was tested and it had to be accepted. Or the skaters, of course, because first of all, many, especially for the older skaters who are used to have more freedom in the free skating programs and doing their spins in their own way, so to say, and step sequences and so on. And now suddenly they have to redo their spins and do it in a much more difficult way, which for them is a big problem because you have to start to learn many of these elements when you're a younger skaters. So it shouldn't maybe have been covered that quickly in the spin, and they shouldn't have made all these changes so quickly. And also it's a fact that there are many problems in the software also, so problems with the computer programs, and it's not always easy to find out about these problems. So who knows what's coming in the future with this kind of system. Well, there are some good parts in it, especially on the technical side. I think there has been a good development, especially in the step sequences, and also that they now try to have better transitions and do more things between elements and so on, and that's good. But I think it is, think now that we have two short programs, one short and one a little bit longer, because it's all predicted what they have to do, what kind of combinations and so on, and how they must be executed and so on. So even if you are a skater now, earlier you had the freedom. If you had made a mistake, you could repeat it or do it in another place in the program, but that is no more possible. So they don't have much freedom. And also I think in the components, I think the judging is very narrow. They keep the marks very, very close, because even if you can sometimes be a very, very good skater, even some junior skaters are really very good in the skating skills, but they don't seem to be rewarded for that. They more or less have the same marks for all the components. And if you have made a mistake or a couple of mistakes in program, still your choreography can be excellent. You have a wonderful program. But if you made mistakes, also the component or the mark for the choreography seems to go down, which has no connection at all. Still the program can be very, very good. So there are parts in this that I think they have to redo, because I think, especially in figure skating, the presentation of a program is so important. That's really part of the beautiful thing involved in our sport. And I think that it is really important to keep the presentation the way it was going up during the last years. Think about Jagodin and his wonderful programs at the Olympics. Many of other good, fantastic programs that we have seen, and I hope that we haven't lost this quality in the presentation because of these components. Well, first of all, I think these the specialists and also the controller, they are really the ones who have really great importance in all of this, because they decide if, let's say, the triple or quadruple was fully rotated or if it was cheated, and what level the step sequence or the spin is. And these are very important factors. And after being a referee for many, many years and also a judge, I know how difficult it sometimes was to decide whether a triple was cheated, quarter cheat, or even a worse cheating, or just a small cheat, and so on. And you had to decide this. We have also had video replay, and I know how difficult it sometimes was to study these video replays and to take this decision. So even with 9 judges, some of them could have made a mistake, and some of them were correct. Now we have only 3 persons here, and if 2 of them are together, then the decision has been made that it was a level 4 or level 3 or whatever it was. So of course they have a lot of power, and what I heard also, that some of these elements they have put in, like it was a triple loop, instead it was a triple toe loop, and the value of these 2 jumps isn't the same. So again, this the skaters are suffering because they don't do a correct job. And then, of course, many of the judges I've talked to, they liked the old system when they could show that I took this decision. They were not at all against, they were not pushed by their federation, and they were not against showing with their marks, I have this skater first, second, and so on. Now, I think that they feel that they have lost a little bit of their personal feeling in all of this. They just push these buttons, and maybe they aren't even focused the way they were earlier with the old system. Of course, they were nervous, they said so, but at least when you had done a championship, you knew that sometimes you made a mistake and you had to take it, but at least they felt much more satisfied with doing it the old way. So I think it is, and if you are an adult, isn't it natural that you have to stand up for your decision and take whatever responsibility it is for a decision you're doing? And if you have accepted to be a championship judge, you should be able to stand in this heat and be able to do the correct decisions. And I don't think that it is fair that the judges aren't shown and that we don't know who did this and that. I guess the ISU knows if they go through the tapes later on, but not anybody outside. Yes, of course. They can still discuss and talk and of course then you don't know if there are probably not all of them in this group that are used to make the result, but if they're lucky they can all be in this group. So nobody knows this either, and of course they can make their decision together. Yeah, I think that was the trademark for figure skating. It was really an important part, and everybody knew who was watching figure skating, like in the arenas or on TV. They knew that if you received a 6-0, it was something fantastic, because there were not many skaters who actually were so good so that they received a 6-0. So I think I miss it, and but I can understand also that you have to develop the sport, but maybe they could have done it in another way and not got rid of our 6-0, because it was, I think for figure skating it was important. No, I don't think so. I think it will take many years until they understand, and still it will be very difficult to figure out until maybe you have a piece of paper in your hand after the competition why this skater got these scores for the first for the technical part and for in the components. Then they can read it, but when they're sitting there in the arena or in front of the TV, it means nothing. You can see or you hear in the arena that this skater is placed number 2, and you know this is in the second place, but you don't understand why the judges took this decision. It was a big difference before when we had the old system, because then many people in the arenas, they were well educated, they understand figure skating, and they knew that this skater deserved maybe a 5.5 and or 5.7 in the presentation, and they were more or less also trying themselves to judge. I think they really enjoyed taking part in the judging this way. Now they don't know anything. It's just a little bit boring, I think. No, I don't think it's possible to have really maybe, like they call it, make a world record in this sport, because there are different people sitting there pushing the buttons, and maybe one thinks an element is worth a +1 and another one maybe has it just a 0, or you are lucky to have only the +1s on your side, or you are unlucky only to have the 0s on your side, and that, so you can never say, and the judges are human beings. They are no robots, even if they now want them to be robots to push exactly +1 when it is a +1, but there are really different opinions, and you can see that when you look in the protocol. And also in the components, they are so different also the way it has been judged. And also I think the judges are really scared not to be in this famous corridor. So they are really scared. They don't often, haven't seen anybody given +3 for an element, for instance, which maybe some skaters really would deserve because it was a beautiful element. But they don't want to stick outside the corridor. They want to keep within it. So that's why most of the judges give a 0 or a -1 or +1, and this is where they are. So maybe one day they will have the possibility to get rid of the corridor and they can judge more freely. And then, of course, the world record is going up even more, even though this skater might not be better than the one from last year who had this so-called world record. So I don't think it's possible to compare. It depends on the judges on the panel also, a lot. Well, it was to create an association only for figure skating, and as I said, to be run by figure skating people, and also to have more skaters involved on every level. And well, I think that was the main purpose. Well, because many members talked to us, but they were all afraid to leave ISU because of, of course, Cinquanta, and were threatening everybody that they were going to have no money. And also, if we were not recognized by IOC, of course, then the members belonging to WSF, they couldn't take part in the Olympics. And I think that was very difficult, and of course I can understand that. No, of course I think this is really unfair, but this is the way ISU has been dealing with this affair, and this is their decision to take this step against us, and also to take the decision against Didier and Marie-Reine LeGougne. So it's for them to answer why the way they treat us this way. But I think also that the ISU want to show to the rest of the world how people are treated who have the courage to stand up and do something against ISU and not having the same opinion and trying to make changes. This is not permitted in the ISU world unless sanctioned by the president. Yes, I think so. And because I think Mr. Cinquanta has big problems taking criticism, and he doesn't want to have any council members who are strong, who have their own opinion, who are criticizing him. He wants to have people surrounding him who more or less are just saying yes to everything he wants, which in a way is not good, because it's very good to have criticism, and it's very good to listen also to other opinions, because then it's helpful to move especially a sport forward, and not only listen to kind of the same ideas they all seem to have. And I think fair. And now also with this new constitution they're bringing forward, there will be a lot of appointments of new directors and new persons, and of course everybody, or not everybody, but many, want to have all these kind of different positions to be appointed by Mr. Cinquanta. And of course this is also helpful for him to control many of these people. Well, it feels very strange that to end, let's say, the career this way, to be ineligible and not to be involved anymore in skating. Uh, Also, I think it feels strange that after all this year involved also with Swedish skating, I think it's strange that I didn't even deserve a phone call, one phone call after Washington from the Swedish Association. So they also have followed the rules by Mr. Cinquanta. And this, the reason I guess was that they wanted to have a world championship, and they also got one in 2008. So they are happy, but they don't speak to me anymore. Yes, he should really look after the business and try to earn as much money as possible from TV and media, and try to present the whole ISU. And I think maybe he's getting too much involved with, especially in figure skating, with the technical part. And this started already after a couple of years as a president, and he wanted to be involved much more in the committee's decision about the technical side and how to handle different issues on the in the programs and so on. So to me, as a president, he got far too much involved in all of these things, where he should have let everything be run by the committees and the vice president for figure skating, and who is really the person who should guide the committees how to proceed with the different problems that we had. This was a normal thing during Joseph Dedic as a vice president. He was a fantastic person to work with, and he was really a leading person of figure skating. And President Paulson never got involved with any details for figure skating when he was the president. Yes, I think actually it. I mean, the reason for it was that the practice and for compulsory figures took hours and hours and hours every day for the skaters, and cost a lot of money, and they couldn't go to school, and also sometimes these compulsory figures were not judged in a correct way. So I think they had to modernize figure skating a little bit and get rid of the compulsory figures. And then, of course, they focused much more on the short programs and the free skating. And we could see there was during these 10 years, there been a big development in the free skating. All these triples and combinations and quads and all of these could never have been executed today if they still have kept the compulsory figures. And also then, during my period on the figure committee, we started very much to work on the presentation mark, as we felt that some skaters, they only focused on these jumps, and we wanted also to for them to work more with the choreography, finding better music, and start to tell us some stories there on the ice. And for some skaters, for both in pairs and singles, they presented some beautiful programs that I think nobody will forget in the future. Yes, this is true. I mean, this was the big worry also from the coaching side, that especially the edges and turns and of different kinds, which I learned in the compulsory figures. Then now the coaches had to find other system of teaching them, the skaters, these edges and turns, and I think now it's working quite well. Sometimes, of course, there are skates you can see they're more skating on the flat and not really using the edges like they used to do before, but mostly it's working well. Yes, it could be, but I think first of all, for skaters who have been around for some time now, for them to suddenly now have to do their programs this way and learn these new ideas, especially in the spins, it's not so easy for them. And but I think maybe for skaters coming up, it will be maybe easier because they will grow up with this kind of system. But I'm afraid that we might see also many more injuries also among young skaters, which already has happened among our junior skaters. Because, you know, if you put in your really difficult elements at the end of the program, then they get better rewarded. But this also means that the skaters are tired and it's easier to have injuries and so on. And also I think that the quality, especially in the spins and also step sequences, might go down, because at least during my time on the figure committee, we tried to have many of the basic spins for the short program for juniors and so on, so that they should really do a quality sit spin, a camel spin upright and so on. And this was for us very important, to give them a good basic to build something on, and then when they moved up to senior, they had a good quality base in their skating. No, I didn't. Well, I have always been really critical sometimes with the skaters, and first of all, you have to give it for the very best skater in the very right moment. And sometimes I was not on that panel where I feel, oh, this skate I could give a 6-0 if I was on that panel. But I never really was a judge on a panel where I felt that this could deserve a 6-0. So I never did, but maybe I could have if I'd been a little bit more generous. Well, first I think that after the Harding Kerrigan case in Lillehammer, then the interest for figure skating from the TV companies and so was huge in North America. And I think they did a competition almost every weekend, and there were lots and lots of figure skating. And I think that they got a little bit tired of all this figure skating, because it was the same skaters, it was the same programs, and I don't think this was really good for figure skating, that they promoted it so much the way they did it. So that was one reason. And then I think also that what happened in Salt Lake, of course, had an effect also, that they felt that the judges were cheating and so on, which was really not a good thing for figure skating. And now then for 2 years after Salt Lake, they used another judging system where they were showing all the marks, and again it was a mess and nobody knew what was going on. And it was also another boring period in this ISU life, with this showing the marks the way they did. And so with this new system also, it's not so interesting anymore when you can't take part yourself in giving marks in your own head and so on. You just sit there and don't know what's going on. You can enjoy some good skating, but not all skating is good either. So this is another problem. And also I think that maybe North America now also don't have, so especially in US figure skating, they need also to have maybe some better skaters coming up. They have had some problems with injuries, and it's also not so good. So I hope that the skaters will now get rid of all the injuries and skate well again. This is necessary too. Yes, personalities and really good programs. If you talk to people in the street, who some of them, they are not interested in sport. When it comes to figure skating, when they show that on the TV, then they watch, because they like the beauty of our sport. They like to watch these skaters down their nice clothes and so on, and they like if they have good music. I think the whole package is really, really important. And it's not only these difficulties, the jumps and so on. I think it is really the way it is presented on the ice. And as you said, only personalities really can show a very good program. And the personalities are not always around, but normally there are talents in many countries, and I hope they can be looked after in a good way. And I think also the problems now with young skaters is that there are so many other sports today who make them interested, and maybe they find figure skating too difficult to learn, because you need to be really focused to become a good figure skater, and also sometimes it costs a lot of money. And so it would have been much wiser to spend all this money not on a new system, but to educate coaches and maybe help the members a little bit more financially than to spend it on these computers that all the members now have to do. And they say it's really hard financially now to do all this. And also nationally to find people who want to do this job as specialists and controllers and all of this, because these are now new people who need to come in, like coaches and so on. And at least here in Sweden, it's a big country, long country, and hasn't been easy to educate and find the people who want to do this job. Well, I'm a little bit concerned, because looking at the Junior Grand Prix and listening to the people who have been out watching them, the news are not so good, because there are not so many good skaters out there for the moment. Of course, junior can come up very quickly, but still I think that, as I said, I think there are many other sports who now also draw, who are more interested to young people. And if we don't get good talents, then I don't see how the sport can develop the way it has up till now. And also with this new system, maybe it starts to be too complicated also for the skaters. And if they don't look after the quality for young skaters, I don't see that we can find good senior skaters in the future. And also, as I've talked a lot about the programs and presentation, I'm feel a little bit concerned also where it will go with these components and the way it is judged. Oh, his skating skills. Really, he was a fantastic free skater, and the way his choreography and his connection to with the public and the audience in the arena, and wonderful skater, and also he was very good technically, but especially his presentation was for me very good. Yes, it was. Jan Hoffman was first off, before him in the compulsory figures, but then already after the short program, he moved up, and then Jan Hoffman skated also a very good free program. Technically, he was really good, clean, but Jan also wasn't really a personality on the ice. He was a technician, but in the second mark he was not that good, and that was for me what the decision went over in favor of Robin Cousins. Well, I was not against this decision. I think if anybody wanted to come back, it could be possible at least once. But I don't think it turned out to be so easy for them, for they were not used to compete on a high level anymore, and they were not used to really with all the tension it means to jump all these difficult do all these difficulties again. So it didn't work out very well for them, and so I'm not so sure it was such a good idea for them to come back. It was only Gordieva Grinko, the Russian pair. They were absolutely fantastic, and especially at the Europeans, which was held a couple of weeks before Lillehammer, then they were absolutely outstanding in the way they skated. Yes, in a good way, I think. But I think, I mean, the great interest for Lillehammer Olympics was, of course, Harding and Kerrigan case, and that really moved the media attention to on the figure skating side. So it's hard to say whether it would have been still a lot of interest because of these old stars coming back, but it took some of the light away from them over to Tonya and Nancy. When I first heard about it, I didn't think very much of it because I thought it was going to be sorted out before the Olympics. But then a couple of weeks before, when it started to be more obvious that Tonya Harding was involved in it, but still she had earned her place to be in the Olympics, and the Olympic Committee didn't want to take it away from her as long as they didn't have put her in, went to court with her and so on. So I realized they are coming, both of these two girls, and I have to sit there and try to make it fair, and not also to have other skaters disturbed by this, because it wasn't easy for also many of the other female skaters who was practicing the same time as these two American girls, because of all this media watching and so on. So it was for them also something different suddenly on the ice. So, but I think the organizers and also ISU handled this very well, and we had no problems during the practice sessions, and though it was unusually many media people on the practice sessions, which we normally don't have, but it was okay. Then in the long program, I had started to relax a little bit. I thought this is going to be fine, and I know that the whole audience was checked before they came into the arena, and there were lots of people out in the arena looking for whatever could come down on the ice. But so I thought, is this going fine? But then, and Tonya Harding, she had an earlier warm-up than Nancy, because she was only on the 10th place after the short program. And then I was coming a lady from behind and telling me that there is a problem with Tonya Harding and the skate, and so she might not come on the ice on time. So then we called her on the ice, and she didn't appear, and so we started the clock, and she had 2 minutes to come on the ice, and she made it out on the ice, and it was obvious when she came out that she was bothered from something. And she went out and started her program, and already after the first try on a triple Lutz, it was obvious that she couldn't skate. And she came up to me and said that she had a problem with the lace, and that she wanted to have a chance to redo it again. And of course you have to check that what she said was telling me the truth. So she lifted up the foot, and we could check that actually it was true. She had broken a shoelace, and the one she had put in was absolutely too short. So the boot was only half laced, and then she had even to escape, get rid of some of the holes to at least put them together a little bit, but it was not possible to skate on such a boot. And it was then in the rule at that time that if a skater had such a problem, you could give them the chance to restart at the end of the group. And so we sent her out, and she came back with a correct shoelace, and she skated her program. The proof was in front of my eyes, and also my assistant referee, he said the same thing, that it's not possible. She could have broken her foot landing, because it was a landing foot, and she could have broken her foot landing on such a badly laced shoe. And it was also a very bad quality of that shoe, because I've noticed during the practices that she was constantly redoing this boot, and I couldn't understand why, but then when I had it in front of me, I understood the reason. It was really, really poor quality, and I couldn't understand why you go to the Olympics with such a bad boot on your feet. But this is how it was, and it was nothing I could do but to send her out, and they put in a correct shoelace, and then she was okay. Yes, I still have a sweater with a autograph of Nancy Kerrigan and also of Tonya Harding. I think I am the only one having this. And also I have the shoelace. So it's in my drawer. Oh, it was the presentation that evening, because Nancy Kerrigan, she skated very well for 2 weeks. I watched all her practices, and she did the free skating always in a very good way, and she technically was really very good. And she had also a good program and so on. But to me, when I saw her this evening, when we had the final free skating, she appeared more like a robot to me after watching her so many times doing exactly the same skating and the same smile and so on. While then when Oksana came out, we had a big crash the same morning, and she was lying on the ice. She had a big crash with, I think it was with Bonali, they crashed. Or it was a German girl, excuse me. And she was injured, and I thought she wouldn't even come on the ice. But then she's coming, and she's starting off very well, doing her triples and also some good other technical elements. But for me, it was the way she presented the whole thing, because you could see that she really started to love skating. She enjoyed it, and the whole audience went with her because of all the happiness she was showing on the ice, and which I had never seen her do before during the practice. And I think it was a great relief for herself that she could skate, because I think she feared I'm not going to be able to skate in the morning when she had her last practice. So I think it was all that coming out of her, and really the feelings, the emotions coming out from her really made me give her 1/10 more in the presentation mark than to Nancy Kerrigan. And I think this was also a split of a 4-5, and I think most of the judges did it this way, with a second mark 1/10 more for Oksana Baiul. Oh, it's in the free skate. It was the big year of Candeloro and his famous step sequence. I absolutely loved his step sequence. That is for me the main picture on the men's event. He had a wonderful free skate that year. Even though he didn't win the gold medal, but still he had a wonderful presentation. Oh, again, it was with Sarah Hughes coming out. Nobody really expected her to win the gold medal. I mean, it had been the discussion that it should be Slutskaya or Michelle Kwan. They were the two who were fighting about the gold medal. And here comes Sarah Hughes out, and she's skating her free skate of her life, doing everything. And again, you could see how happy she was, how wonderful it was to be a figure skater out there, and the way she presented it all and started to relax. And it's just a really special feeling when you see a skater enjoying skating so much as she did that evening. It was just her evening. And then of course it was a great pressure on Kwan and also Slutskaya, who skated at the end of this free skate, to come out on the ice when they knew that she had done such a good free skate, and so probably knew about the marks and so on. So it was not so easy for them, and it was really obviously, especially I think Slutskaya was rather nervous during her free skate. Yes, I think with the second mark she could have been second, because to me her second mark was better than Slutskaya's second mark, but technically Slutskaya was a little bit better. Michelle had a mistake, and so that could have been, they were very close for me.